All right, so Marathon Server Slam starts in a little under 12 hours, and I wanted to compile 10 tips of things that you should be looking for heading into it, because this Server Slam essentially is the de facto sort of beta for the game, I guess, and it's important to remember that the Server Slam is not just to test server stability and things like that. It is to find things that might genuinely be wrong with the game, or things they might need to implement in their first upcoming patch post-launch. So I wanted to compile a list of things that we should be looking for and focusing on heading into the Server Slam. So yeah, let's just get right into it. And the first one I already mentioned it is the server stability. And this is very important for me particularly because I came from Payday 3 and that was my first live service game I covered on this channel. And if you know about games and live service games, you know about the disaster of Payday 3's launch, where most players literally just couldn't even play the game online for about the first week or so, and it killed all momentum of the game. So that is definitely something that we need to be looking out for, making sure that, one, you can connect to the game, two, you can be able to get into lobbies quickly, and three, whenever you're in the lobbies, you don't disconnect. There's no frame issues, there's no general performance or service instability in there. And that is, for me, at least for a beta or a server test, that is one of the most important things that they need to nail down. And it's good that they're doing this Server Slam as a stress test, and that's genuinely, it is from their perspective, it is their main reason to be doing the Server Slam. But yeah, moving on to the second tip for things that I think we should be looking out for is the map design. And I'm not sure there's going to be multiple maps in the Server Slam, but for whatever maps are available, things such as power positions, map flow, loot disparity between locations, which is very important because depending on the extraction points, having a good spread between high, medium, and low loot areas is very important to making the map feel like it has a good flow and a good a system you can work through depending on whatever spawn point. So there's not a situation where maybe if you don't get a favorable spawn point, you kind of just want to extract immediately. And that's something that is very important, is the map design going into an extraction shooter, and basically making sure that every team that spawns in or every player that spawns in the map feel like they have a fair chance at getting at least some good enough loot and being able to extract if they're doing it in a timely fashion. All right, so the next tip on this list is the sound design, and I've already heard that Marathon sound design is actually really good, and you would hope so, being that it's an extraction shooter. But I do think that we should be looking out for things like footstep audio. How clear and concise is footstep audio, because we know that it's an extraction shooter and people like to ride around in extraction shooters, and with there being strong shells and abilities such as the ones from Assassin, I think that having clear and concise footstep audio and being able to tell where the draw distance is from that is very important. And also things such as vertical audio accuracy. Typically this is the problem with dense elevation areas in most FPS games. Also a really important thing is gunfire suppression and being able to tell whether shots are being fired indoors or outdoors. That's also really important. Another thing is if a weapon has a suppressor on it, is the audio muffled properly on that? That's also a really important aspect of it. And just the gunfire draw distance. This is a really annoying thing about FPS games, is that sometimes gunshots will sound like they're 100 meters away and they're 20 meters away, and you get caught off guard by that and you might be unprepared for the gunfight. So these are all things to be looking out for. The general sound design, the distance between sounds, if sounds are displaying properly or if they're delayed, things like that is just things to be looking out for heading into the Server Slam. All right, so the next tip I have on this list is trying out all the runner shells basically as much as you can. I don't think that in a Server Slam you should try to tie yourself down to one runner shell and already pick your main. You have so much time to do that, and there's so much more opportunity to figure out what your actual playstyle is going to be like and what shell is going to suit your playstyle the best. And trying out things like the Destroyer, making sure that his shield is not too tanky and that his homing missiles aren't too powerful, or such as the Assassin. If you test the Assassin smoke, make sure that it's not a one-way smoke, that kind of thing, and make sure that there's no weird glitching that allows the invisible ability to last longer or perhaps indefinitely. Making sure that kind of stuff isn't in the game. For the recon, making sure that the pulse ability to reveal enemies isn't too large, and same goes for the interrogation trait that they have. For triage, which is essentially the medic, making sure that the med drone doesn't overheal or is overriding incoming damage. That is a really big problem with a lot of games, is it sometimes meds will override damage that's still being done to the player actively. And yeah, just making sure stuff like that isn't in the game. For Thief, I'm not really too worried about the Thief runner shell, but I don't know, maybe make sure that the grapple isn't too OP in terms of its range, and maybe test its ability to exploit the terrain to see if you can get any really weird exploit spots that might be a problem. And also for Vandal and Rook, I'm not really too worried about these, but again, just test them anyways. Try as many shells as you can to, one, make sure that you know what your playstyle is going to be like and know what shell you're going to like the best, and two, to test any exploits or any, abilities that might be out of balance, that kind of thing. All right, so the next step I got here is fairly straightforward. Is to be ready for the enemy AI threat level. And this is very important because this is a mostly PvP game, but it still has an aspect of PvE. So if you're solo or if you're even in squads, you can still use proximity chat to team with other players and to make sure that, the AI threat level is strong enough to still deal with teamed up players is actually very important heading into the launch. Okay, and tip number 6 on this list is the extraction time windows, or even the extraction locations. Like, do they feel too long? Do they feel too short? Is there a big difference between the extraction points? For example, do certain extractions require special keys or puzzles to open them? I feel like all this is very important. And again, it ties into the map design because the extraction locations and the time frame directly correlates with the loot disparities that might be at different locations. So that's something to look out for, is how does the extraction time windows feel? I can't remember where I saw this, but I'm pretty sure I remember Bungie saying that they want their extraction rates to be below 50%. And definitely when you have only 25 minutes to get as much loot as you can and then to extract, you need that window to be precise and balanced to where you can achieve that 50% to where it doesn't feel too long, but it also doesn't feel way too short and you're falling well behind, maybe into 20 and 15% where people just really, they can't get out with any loot at all if they want to, if they want to explore enough. But yeah, just making sure that there's a nice balance within the extraction timeframes is something that I think that we should be looking out for. All right, so tip number 7 I have here is something I say for basically every live service game, is to try out solos and to try out squads basically equally if you can, because I feel like trying out both of them and seeing which experience benefits you more, or which experience is probably more beneficial for players with a particular playstyle, is very important to a game's overall healthy, I guess, balance. Being able to see what works well in solos versus what works well with the team is obviously going to be very different things. All right, so the next tip I have is trying out as many weapons as you possibly can, trying out the TTK, the gun balance, things like that. And I know that most of my gameplay tips is basically just saying try out a variety of basically everything. But I mean, genuinely, people get stuck in this way of like one play style. They find this one weapon they really like, and that's the only thing they want to use. They find this one runner shell that they really like, and that's the only thing they want to use. Even though there's something that might be better out there that more fits their play style, they get stuck in this way of, well, I found this and it works for me early, so that's the only thing I want to use. And I have no evidence if this is the case or not. But my hope is that if you're using something like a sniper rifle, then it is more beneficial to use it on a shell like the Assassin. Or if you're using an SMG, it's more beneficial to use it on a shell like the Destroyer, where you can get up close and personal. But you really only get those kind of results when you're testing out multiple weapons, you're testing out multiple shells, and you're mixing and matching to see what works best for you and what works best in game. All right, so to round out the list with tips number 9 and 10, they're not going to be that important for the Server Slam in particular, but I still feel like it's something that we should be looking out for. And the first thing is the progression system that might be shown or might be available to some degree. And this is obviously very important because outside of it just being an extraction shooter where you get loot and extract, there still needs to be some sort of baseline progression that you're going for. And, whether there's a level cap to what's available to us in the Server Slam, I still want to see what it's like, and whether it's stuff like maybe there is a weapon level progression system where even if you come into a map with basically nothing, you still can pick up a weapon there's going to be of good quality because you basically maxed it out or something. Or maybe there's a level progression tied to the runner shells. But that leaves the final tip on this list, which is the social features for PvP, such as things like pings, whether it's pings on the map, waypoint trackers, or the communication wheel with actual useful prompts that people can understand. I don't know, maybe just making pings available to players you want to see them that are outside of your squad is enough. But yeah, I don't know, some sort of social feature like that would go a long way in making Marathon have a unique social feature to it like Arc Raiders did. And who knows, that alone might be enough for the PvE crowd to be happy enough to actually try this game, because it's essentially mostly a PvP game and they really don't like that. So maybe if you add some really good and in-depth social features, it might get some of those Arc Raider players to come and try out this game. But yeah, that's all I got. There's 10 tips for things to look out for, things to do in the Server Slam for Marathon, and I am very excited to get into it. I'm very excited to try out all the things that I mentioned. Again, this is basically the beta, and most betas before launch, they can't really change too much, but it's about being able to give that feedback on top of making sure that the servers are stable enough for the full official release. And I know we're all going to be happy just to hop on the game. It's going to be the honeymoon phase. We're all just going to be, oh my god, everything's awesome, it's amazing, and you're just just having the best time. But I still feel like it is some duty to us as gamers to test out basically all the systems that we can and give out as much feedback to the devs as we can so that the game is as good as it can be. Because although I'm sure the closed alpha did give them a lot of feedback, I mean, that's nothing compared to opening up your playtest to the masses. I mean, you find all sorts of stuff when you just basically open your playtest to everybody. And I'm ready to hop in. Like, I put in 12 hours of PTO. I am ready to hop in. This is the most excited I've been for probably a live service game. And I mean, it's probably been at least 3 years since I've been this excited for a live service game. But yeah, I can't wait to actually hop into Tau Ceti. It's do or die. It's sink or swim, right? And then, yeah, let's see how good the game actually feels now that they've done a lot of improvements, a lot of updates, how good the game runs, you know, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, anyways, I'm gonna stop rambling, and that's it for me. I'll see you next time.